But no, actually, my story dates back to when things were simpler, you know, to a time when we lived with a secure naivety about the world, if you like. And it was like, you know, it was a time before things like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn, and even before COVID-19. So, and it was actually a time before internet dating. You know, I'm not sure if you can remember that, but I fondly remember the times before eHarmony and Tinder Surprise and RSPCA. But it was actually the time when we watched TV on a TV, if you like, and email was becoming a big part of our lives. Yeah, and it's what I like to call the days of dial-up, if you like. I'm not sure. Can you remember that, Matt?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can make that connection. There's a noise in the background that was hopefully trying to remind you of that. And this story revolves around the phenomenon of email, okay, and specifically scam emails. Okay, so I was in my 20s, and all was going pretty well with my life. I had a good job, a great girlfriend. I had paid off my university debts, and I even had recently bought my first new car. All right, so things were going really good. And so what I decided to do is I quit my job, broke up with my girlfriend, packed up my life, and I went backpacking. Yeah? So, and during this time, I was actually in Scotland at one point, which is a beautiful place, but I can't go into too much detail tonight. We don't have time, but it is. And I was in Scotland, and I was checking my emails. Now, when you're backpacking during the days of dial-up, checking your emails meant you needed to go to an internet cafe or a library or somewhere where you could get that connection. Okay, so for me, there was quite some time. Sometimes there was days or even weeks between times I would check my emails. So on this occasion, I was in this tiny Scottish town of Drumnadrochit, and I was checking my emails, and I received an email from a gentleman who called himself Dr. Sani Ahmed. Okay, and Sani explained to me that he was a recently retired bank official of the Nigerian National Bank, and he had retired with a prince's recognition, no less, for his services to the financial sector. Okay, and because Sani had identified me as someone he could trust, he wanted to make a proposal. And I mean, why not, you know? And so obviously, Matt, you know, these days that this is a hoax email. I think these days it's known as the Nigerian 419, but this was very early days in this email scam, and it was definitely the first one I'd received. So I wrote back to Sani, and I said, I would love to hear his proposal. Okay, so he then wrote to me and said that during his time as a banker, he had embezzled around $50 million US, but he couldn't access it in Nigeria. So what he wanted me, or what he would like me to do, is he wanted to send it to another country, and if I could pick it up, he would pay me $5 million US. And at the time, that was around 12 million Australian, I think. Now, 99% of me knew this was all bullshit, all right? But there was this 1% of what if, yeah? And 1% of what if is quite a powerful thing to an intrepid young man, okay? So I wrote back to Sani and said, I was in, I'm up for it. So then he started getting in touch with me, and he wanted to send the money to Cairo, but I said, no, London is good. And then he wanted to send the money to Barcelona, and I said, no, London works. And then he wanted to send it to Rome, and I said, no, London will do. And then he tried Frankfurt and Milan and Berlin and a bunch of other places. Now, at this time also, I was still travelling around Scotland, and this went on for over 2 months. And to be honest, I thought he would get tired of it and give up. But then one day I was travelling, it's when I left Scotland, I was travelling with a massive hangover from Inverness to London on a bus, which is a massive bus ride with it. And about halfway through, I got this phone call, and it was Sani. And he was quite upset and irate with me, and he was like, Mr. Muldoon, this is the last chance. We must do something with this money now. it must be done straight away, immediately, or it will be gone. And I sort of said, oh, okay, mate, we'll send it to London and I might be able to do something. And he said, no, we can't send it to London. He was quite irate. And I said, well, mate, I don't know what to tell you. I can't help you. And I just hung up. And it was funny because then he emailed me again. I got to London, I emailed back, and then he rang me again as I was in London. And he rang and he said, look, we must act now. This is very important. And he was quite irate with me. And so I said, so you can't send the money to London? And he said, no, that can't be done. And I said, oh, well, send it to Amsterdam. And he stopped and he had a thought. There was silence on the phone for a moment. And then he said, I will look into this. I will call you back. And within 1 hour, he had called me back and said, yes, he could do that. So the next thing, and not only was he sending the money to Amsterdam, he was also going to send his assistant, Mr. Michael Remedi, to Amsterdam as well. And he would meet me there and we would go and do the business together. And that would be that. So the next thing I know, I'm on a plane to Amsterdam. And I'd never been there before. So, excuse me, the plan was that I would arrive, I would call Mr. Remedi, and then we would get together, we would go and collect this package that had been sent to customs, and then and all that would occur. So I arrived, but my phone didn't work. And so I thought, so I wandered around the airport for a while, and I actually tried to see who I might be meeting. I picked out 3 people. All right. One person was a massive man, like 7 foot tall, in a bone suit, and he was sitting in an airport bar. There was a second guy who was a shady looking character wearing a bomber jacket walking around. And then there was a third guy who was a really thick set, muscular, big guy wearing all black. And he was wearing like a coat that they wore in the Matrix, you know, a long black coat. And so I've picked these 3 guys out in, you know, this is an international airport. And then I went back to the gate and I sort of hung around. And the next thing, Mr. Remedi rang me. And he's there, you know, Mr. Muldoon, where are you? And I said, I'm at the gate. And he's like, I'm at the gate also. He said, put your hand up. And I said, well, there's no need, mate. Turn around. And this guy turned around, and the look on his face, because I was standing there in front of him, was just like, you know, because I'd kind of hustled him, if you like, in a way. And it was the first guy I'd picked out in the bone suit, the massive guy. So the next thing, we sit down in this airport bar. He grabs his cognac and he goes through the plan. And the plan basically was that we were going to go and collect the money. But first up, I would need to give €7,000 to the person at customs and so I could collect the package. And I just said, well, that's the first I've heard about this. And he said, it's okay, you know, you will get it all back, you know, it'll all be great. And I sort of said, well, no, I can't do that. So we sat there for an hour while he tried to convince me. And first up, I told him I don't have €7,000, but then while we were talking, I had an idea. And I decided I would tell him I do have €7,000, but I had to go into town to collect it. Okay, so then we decided, okay, we'll go to town, get a hotel for the night. I would go and get the €7,000. Tomorrow we'd come back, pay the money, collect the package, the $50 million, and we'd all live happily ever after, you know. So off we went. And as we were walking out, he said to me, I'll call my driver. And he said, he made it a point to say, you will not speak to my driver, only I do. And I was like, oh, okay. And he calls his driver, and this guy comes and meets us. And it was actually the guy in the long matrix coat, the thick set guy. Now, this guy was very intimidating. He looked like a person who has done bad things in his life. So I sort of looked at him, but I was there in my head. I was feeling like some sort of secret agent because I'd picked 3 people and 2 of them were involved in an international airport. So anyway, I jumped in the car with them. So off we went and we drove into Amsterdam. Now we went and we found a hotel. Mr. Remedi didn't like the idea. He didn't want to stay in the same hotel as me for some reason. I'm not sure what. But anyway, we went in, I checked in, and then as we walked in, he accompanied me to my room. And he was actually the only person in the world, besides the driver, that knew where I was at this point in time. And he came in, and then we sat there for another hour or 2 while he went over and over this plan. And at times it got quite intimidating. He was actually physically hitting me with the back of his hand because we were in a small room, telling me I could trust him. The €7,000 euro was nothing. And this went on for quite a while, until eventually he started to wear out. And I said, oh, look, you know, we can talk about it more in the morning. Okay, and he went to leave, and he kept trying to, you know, obviously with this hustle, he's trying to convince me I can trust him. So as he's leaving, he's pulled out a cross that he had on a necklace to say, again, you know, you can trust me, I'm a man of God, and he's showing me this cross that's around his neck. And I said to him, oh, that's good, mate. And I just said, well, there was this pendant that was given to me of a dove to keep me safe by my mum when I had travelled, and it was, I'd put it on a strap on my backpack. And I just pointed at it and I said, oh, well, you'll know what that is. And because he's so tall, he bent down to have a look at it. And when he bent down, his jacket rode up. And that's when I saw his gun. And at that point, yes, and at that point, I had a surge of adrenaline go through me that I'm sure would bring an elephant back to life. Okay. And my heart was thumping, you know, just all the symptoms of a massive adrenaline rush. But I had to keep cool because he didn't know that I'd seen it. And he's still talking to me, you know, you can trust me, come back tomorrow, we're going to do all this. And I just basically smiled and nodded at him for the last few minutes as I ushered him out the door. And he was still talking to me on the other side of the door while I locked it up. So anyway, then eventually he left. Now, I'd already decided in my mind, after I sat there and had a moment, obviously, and then, of course, the paranoia set in. And let me tell you, Matt, I didn't need to go to a coffee shop when in Amsterdam to get that. I was full bleeding. But then I thought, well, I'm going to go, but I'll have a bit of a look around Amsterdam. So I went down to go out to have a look around at like 2 o'clock in the morning. You know, anyway, as I left the concierge, I had a chat to him, and he said to me, oh, do you know these people that you came to the hotel with? And I said, oh, kind of. And he made a point to say to me, he said, you must be very careful. He was a typically Dutch man, you know, lovely man. And he's like, you must be very careful of people in Amsterdam because some of them are really dangerous. And I just went, oh, okay. So I had a quick look around. Anyway, that night, obviously, I didn't sleep much. But that morning at 7 a.m. in the morning, the phone in my room rang, and it rang every 15 minutes until I left. And I didn't answer it, obviously, because I was freaking out. And the only people in the world that knew where I was Mr. Remedi and his driver. So what I did is I checked out, I walked to the train station, got the train to the plane, to the airport, and I flew back to London. And it's, I know it's a good if you can finish off a story with a joke or a euphemism or a lesson you've learned or something like that, but I don't really do that with this. But what I can to say is the best part of this whole experience for me probably came a few years later when I was back in Australia and I was working as an export manager with a business. And obviously in that role, a lot of scam emails were sent to the marketing email address. And one day the IT manager let slip that he thought I was away out of the country. And I said to him, oh, have you been reading my emails, have you? And he said, yeah, the whole department does. We love them. They're so entertaining. And he said, but what we don't understand is we are never quite sure who your real customers are and who you're not. Because what I'd been doing is I replied to all these scam emails and I was meeting with these people, these hustlers, in airports all over the world because I quite like the idea of them going to meet me and me never showing up. And so if there is any, and the IT manager, he used to worry about me. He'd say, aren't you worried they'll come to Australia and try and get you? And I said to him one day, I said, oh, mate, if they ever come to a country town in Australia, you know, to get me, it's going to make for one hell of a story, isn't it? So the only lesson I can say is respond to your scam emails and organise to meet them at places all over the world and just don't show up. And that's that, mate.
Mate, you live a dangerous life. I'm like, my heart is going right now. I don't even know how to respond to this. Oh,
you wouldn't want to know what my heart did when I saw that gun around under his jacket. I was, whoa. Yeah.
And, wow. I mean, thank God they weren't like